everyone. My name is Roel Raymond, and I will be talking to a number of exceptional women who have made impacts in their own industries and sectors as part of the Frederick Naumann Foundation's Female Forward initiative. Today we have with us award-winning author and publisher Ameena Hussein. Hi, Ameena.
Thank you so much, Roel. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you. Ameena, like I said, you're an award-winning writer and a publisher, and your most recent book was Ibn Battuta in Sri Lanka, was also shortlisted for the Gratian Award. Are you living your dream life? Is this what you wanted?
Well, my mother used to call me a grasshopper when I was a child. So now my grasshopper mind is also wanting to do other things. But yes, this is very much one of the parts of me that I wanted to be, to run my own publishing house and to write the books I wanted to write. So yeah.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit to when you were younger. I mean, you just said you had a grasshopper, or you have a grasshopper mind, which means like you want to be many things. But was there at any point a period when you thought, this was my biggest goal, to be a writer? And what were the challenges you faced at that moment? Because we all know writers have this huge period of self-doubt, and especially in the early stages, right? So if you could describe just maybe that early stage of embarking into writing.
So I grew up in the 1970s, and actually being a writer never, ever, ever entered my mind because it was a different era from today. I mean, I grew up in a fairly conservative Muslim family, an extended family as well. So we were told to study, but actually maybe my sister and I kind of knew that we may not be allowed to work. So, we would study, and then all the examples we had before of us, cousins, our aunts, were that they would get married and have a family. So that was the kind of environment that I grew up in. Even though I went to St. Bridget's Convent, and I mean, you had friends that you knew who would go on to do other things. So being a writer was never ever something I thought about, because even though I read a lot and I wrote fairly well, our parents were not ambitious for us in the sense that, because our worldview was fairly contained, and it was if you've ever read Stay Daughter and you read Yasmin Azad's account of growing up in a very conservative Galford family, I mean, that's very conservative, her experience, and the fact that she fought to have an education, got an education, got married, and then went and lived in the States and worked in the States. That's an amazing trajectory and very unusual for a Muslim woman. So in the 1970s, it would have been pretty much, like we would have gone to school, done our A-levels. It was a big thing to do our A-levels, because I don't think I had a single cousin. I didn't have a single first cousin who had done A-levels. So my mother was really determined that my sister and I do A-levels. She was very clever. I was extremely average. Not a single teacher remembers me. The principal doesn't remember me. I was supposed to be naughty, but even my naughtiness was average because I was not remarkable.
I feel you. I hear you.
So, and I like to tell that message. I think it's very important to give that message out, because I see parents putting a lot of pressure on children to be exceptional. And there were exceptional kids in my class who went on to, be the doctors, the lawyers, the accountants. But I was certainly not one of them. And I'm actually surprised at how my life turned out.
The creative kid, even though the doctors have to be the doctors and the lawyers will be the lawyers, the creative kids who are sort of not taken notice of in school and stuff like that, those are the kids.
I would totally champion the underdog. I think the underdog is the surprise success. It is the underdog is the one that I've always thought that especially in this country, it may apply to much of South Asia, that the creatives are never given their worth. And so, which is one of the reasons why I never ever thought I'd become a writer. I may have wanted to become an actress because I was always told I was a drama queen. And my father, he told me, you can become an actress if you can get into RADA, and you won't get into RADA. So forget that. So then I was like, okay, fine, I'll just be a drama queen at home. And, you know, like kind of, it was all, Roel, you're asking me to remember time so long ago, right?
That's what made you.
But it's also, I always think that I grew up in a bit of a fairy tale time, fairy tale inverted. We grew up during the Mrs. Bandaranaike era, right? There were restrictions in every sphere of your life. And children, I'm sure most children were very politically aware in a weird, unpolitical way, in the sense that you understood why you wore the clothes you wore. You understood why you ate what you ate. You understood the cues, the ration books. And also being part of a minority family, discussions would happen all around us. It was not censored, of what it is to be a minority. And so we were always, plus I belonged to a minority that also had very strong cultural and social norm and religious norms. It's like what a woman could do, what a woman could wear, what a woman could say, uh, how she presents her public, persona, which didn't exist actually. You're not supposed to present a public persona. So there are still a few of my cousins who are not comfortable with me being on interviews and featured in the papers, because it is not
part of the upbringing.
Yeah, it's not part of the upbringing. They're older than I am, of course.
But so much has changed. Yes, so much has changed in the years after.
So much has changed. I'm sure modern Muslim girls have no idea what it is like to have, and that's why I am really flummoxed when I meet women, Muslim or not, who say that they are not feminists, because actually I was born a feminist. I was born asking the questions, why not, why can't, I want all those things, and the answers I got were not enough.
Were these questions encouraged, Ameena, at home? I get the feeling that they were.
My father was liberal-minded to a point. He was liberal-minded to human beings, but he actually didn't think of us as girls or women. So when the time came when we were older and we had to go to university, it came as a big surprise, because he hadn't planned actually on sending his daughters to university. We both went to universities as happy accidents. It was not at all planned. It was that my sister and I, we both got married, and we both went to university after we got married, again as happy accidents.
Wow. And what did you choose to study at that time? What was your interest?
Because I never expected to go to university, I was this tabula rasa who went into this American university. And the best piece of advice my father gave me when he realized that I got the chance to go to university, being safely married, he said, university is not just book experience. He said, it is a total experience. And I appreciate that he said that, because even though I do think that I totally blossomed in university, I was a late bloomer. I mean, this average student, I went on to graduate with honors. I loved studying. I loved the subjects, but I didn't know what I wanted to study. So I took a sociology class. I totally fell in love with it. And in my second year, I think, at university, And I decided I'm going to do sociology. So I became a sociologist.
Wow. So how did you get into literature then? Because writing is a whole other thing. And I mean, you can write and I can write, but writing, the kind of writing that you do, writing fiction, there's a whole technique to it. It's not something that you, just because you're a writer, you can do.
Yeah, so that everything in my life is that I'm sorry, Roel, if you wanted me to be a role model, I am not the person who like set her mind to it and just went. I told you I'm a floater, so like everything just happened by accident. I was always writing. No, I was always writing, but it was very, very private. When you did sociology, you had to do one of the requirements of your basic bachelor's degree was to do a thesis. And I remember that I chose as my thesis South Asian Muslim women migrants in Los Angeles. It was so specific. And I interviewed about 30 to 40 Muslim women from Bangladesh and Pakistan, a few from Sri Lanka, many from India. And I was hypnotized and struck by their stories and their trajectory of many of them had stories like mine. They all got married. They all came to this country, but they had come a good 10 years earlier. And so many of them had not gone to university at that time. They had children and they were mothers and wives. And some of them had trained in university much later. Many of the stories were sad.
Right.
And they were of a lack of power. And I began writing that on the side because I couldn't put that in my thesis.
Yeah, but that's not fiction, right? Like, so moving into fiction would have been a huge a part of your growth, I would say, as a writer. And
so you start writing those stories, and then you think I can't actually write it the way they said it. So then you start, and believe me, these stories were just for me. No, it was not for public consumption. I used to have this big red notebook. I mean, now you have beautiful barefoot notebooks. It was some cheap drugstore notebook that I bought. But I had made a good friend in a Sri Lankan professor who he wasn't a professor at that time. He sadly passed away this year, Kadri Ismail. And I had made a good friend, and we would chat a lot. And he said, show me your stories. And I did one day, and they were handwritten. So he read it. He said, you have potential. But he just said, I couldn't finish reading it because I only read stories written. I only read stuff written on a computer. If you want to be a writer, a serious writer, you have to write on a computer, which I wasn't used to doing. So I had to start doing that. But it was Reggie Siriwardena. So I'm moving ahead in time. I graduated as a sociologist. I came back to Sri Lanka and I started working with Radhika Kumaraswamy and Neelan Tiruchavam at the ICS. Again, I mean, luck was on my side. It was a magical time. You had Dr. Malathi and you had Pradeep, you had Sonali Darnyagala, you had Darini, and you had all these, and you had Sunil Bastian. I mean, it just runs the gamut. You had visitors like Professor Stanley J. Thambaya, Gananath Besekara, and all these marvelous thinkers who would flit in and out. And you're quite young. I was in my 20s, and you're the fly on the wall. So I showed my stories to Reggie Siriwardena, who liked it very much, and who said, I'll publish it in the Thatched Patio. But I was too frightened to publish it under my name. So I published it under another name. And my initial stories were very, very, what hear me, woman, I will roar. And what is that? It's like they were roaring women. And people were really astounded. They were like, who is this person? And what is she writing? And I would be there at the table. I just waited like a little mouse. I didn't say anything. And it kind of challenged people. Many of them were surprised and shocked, and some didn't like, and others were like, oh, she's like, she's saying interesting things.
It's a good way to test the waters, I would say. I would totally recommend writing under another name initially. And I think you made the right decision there. Would you consider yourself political, Ameena?
So again, Kadri Ismail has to come into my conversation, because when I was writing, he told me writing is political. And you know, when you tell that to a young 20-year-old at that time in the 1980s, right? You react. And I said, no, I don't want to be political. I'm not political. I don't write politics. I actually was very interested in Muslim women's stories. I didn't realize at that time everything is political. Life is political. And every word you write has political weight. The way you live your life has political weight. So I think everybody who has something to say, whether they want it or not, makes some sort of impact, and that impact will be political in some way or another. And I'm not talking about political in the sense of government. I'm talking of political in the sense of agency and the influence that you have over people.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. Yeah, that's very important to make that differentiation and clarification, because that's where I asked you that question. It's a loaded question, but I asked you that because lots of people think being political is to be electorally political, or to get out there and contest for government. But very few see that politics is actually, like you said, agency and intentionality, and the choices you make, and what you think is also political.
And Roel, I'm still struck that we are in 2021, and there are so many things that women can't take for granted. And I mean, I'm in my mid-50s, and I think it's a sad commentary on actually. In fact, I think we have become more conservative. We have regressed in a way when you come to women's choices of what they wear and where they go and what they can do. So it's something we have to consider.
Right. I think I can unpack that or ask to unpack that, but I feel that I'm going to keep that for a separate interview with you. With this, I'm going to move now to your evolution as a publisher, which is a very different area of getting involved in your business. So how easy or difficult is it to be a publisher in Sri Lanka? I know you have a niche market. Do you want to keep it that way, or do you want to just nurture it, or do you want to nurture it and expand it, or how does it work? Because we know all about niche markets in Sri Lanka and Colombo and how it works.
So I don't want a niche market. I actually want it to be everywhere, but it doesn't happen that way, considering that we are publishing in a third language, that reading has reduced a lot even amongst people who speak the third language, and that so you're catering to a very, very small segment of the population. If I was a Sinhala language publisher, I will be beaming, and I will be sitting here and like talking to you about, my numbers being so big. But yeah, we are. In which country in the world is there a publisher publishing in the third language? I mean, actually, maybe we are quite unique in that we had the foolish confidence in doing it. But I'm very happy I did it. It was when I published 15 in 1999. I actually was looking for a publisher, and I think the only one available was Vijitiyapa. And because I was working at ICS, Reggie Sirivardhana said, why don't you send your collection up to the board and ask them if they will approve publishing it from ICS? So let it be an ICS publication. ICS did publications that were mostly academic. So I said, okay, because I worked there and I knew everybody, and I thought I could oversee the whole production, which I did. And they agreed to publish it. So that's when I realized that there weren't that many publishers that people could send their work to. And then I thought, sometime in my life, I would run a publishing house. But the sometime is, remember my mother's grasshopper mind?
Yeah.
It was, so the sometime was after I did all the other things. And
Yeah.
then at some point. So then I met Sam, and
Yeah.
I married Sam. And then we went off to Switzerland. And one of the, it's a joke that we always say, but it's a joke that borders on half truths, a lot of truths actually, is that there were two things I asked Sam, which was two things I told him, not that I asked. I've said, I want to run a publishing house and I want to live out of Colombo. Are you in it? Are you in the game? You know?
You're that kind of person. Down with it.
Yeah, because you know, I was in my early 30s, and when you are at that age, you kind of know what you want for yourself, and you think, yeah, you, when you're choosing a partner at that age, and there are two particular things that you want to be really cautious and sure and find out if that person is on the same page.
I agree
And
with you.
and Sam was like, let's go for it. And I'm like, whoa. So we went off to Switzerland because he was working there. And I wanted to live in Switzerland for, at least to say that I've lived in Europe. So we lived there for 3 years. And after, I told him I'll live there for 3 years, after which I will come back. And you can come back whenever you want. But he came back with me. And I will say I had the idea, but it is Sam who has, I always had the idea, because I'm a cautious person, that both of us would have real jobs and do the publishing as a sideline. But he was like, if we do it, we are both quitting. I mean, I had a job at ICS. I had like this permanent job at ICS. And he said, no, you have to give it your all. And it's been tough because we've had no backup. But in a way, maybe it is what it is, because this is the only thing we've got. And we've just given it our all.
Yeah. Wow. So that's the birth of Perera-Hussein.
Perera-Hussein. So even the name was, the birth of Perera-Hussein actually started a bit before, because we couldn't come up with a name. I wanted all these exotic names: Coconut Tree Hill, Mango Publications, you know, Clove, all these exotic names. And we fought about everything that should have given me an indication of. And then when I came up with Perera-Hussein, we couldn't exactly fight about our names. And we thought, okay, yeah, it also gives an indication of who the publishing house is.
Right. Okay, so last few questions, because time is running out and I'm trying to get it in. I have 8 minutes. Okay. This is touching on something you said before about young people perhaps not reading as much anymore. Do you agree with that? Do you think that is there anything people can do, people especially in your position can do, to lure younger people into reading more? Is this a gone?
So I should make clarification. Young people are reading more, but they're reading differently. So they're reading on their phones, they're reading short pieces, they're not reading the longer pieces perhaps, because maybe their attention span is, because of the world that we live in, it's constantly being stimulated by so many different things. I actually think that's not my job to make young people read. My job is I want to write and I write. People read if they want to read. Young people will eventually become middle-aged people, eventually become old people. And at some point they're going to say, we want to read whatever, you know, a book of short stories, a book of whatever. I think it's up to parents. Parents frequently come to me and say, my son or my daughter my son or my daughter is 17 years old and cannot write well, and spelling is atrocious, and can you give me some help? By help, they actually mean, for me, not being a teacher, I don't know why they come to me, but to tutor them or give them some reading. And I said, yeah, I can definitely give them some help. Give them a stack of books, tell them to read, because the best way to learn to spell is to actually see the word written out, and to constantly see it, you learn to spell. The best way to improve your vocabulary, to improve your grammar, is to actually read, and then you understand how sentence is structured. You may not understand the concepts of grammar and the grammatical terms, but you understand how a sentence should look, and how a sentence should sound, and how a word is spelled. So I'm not too worried about that, actually. I think people read, people read when they want to read. They read what they want to read, and whatever they read, I think is fine. Uh, I was having a Zoom get together with I was part of a fellowship last year, the Rice Fellowship, which is based in Australia, but we had to meet online, and it was conducted through a Singapore. It was conducted through Singlet, and one of the people there said that they actually they don't care even if people read porn,
as long as they're reading. Yeah. No.
As long as they're reading. Yeah. So I thought, I was struck. I thought that I never thought about that. And that's interesting, you know. So maybe not children, but yeah.
Yeah, I didn't
read
think about
whatever
it.
that interests you, you know.
Yeah. I mean, that's good news. That really expanded my view of thinking as well. Very last question, and it's a quick fire one. As a writer, if you had to choose, okay, let's put it this way, not as a writer, but to a writer, what is more important? Very good imagination or good writing ability?
I'm so glad you asked that question, Roel, because I discovered I'm not a writer. I've discovered what I am. I was reading through a thread, and I came across this comment about me. So someone had read my book, and this comment came up like, she's such a good storyteller. And that's what I am. I am a storyteller. So even when I speak, even when I'm at a party, even when I'm visiting someone who is sick, so even when I'm writing, I'm telling stories. And I thought that is the description, because after I heard Kanya de Almeida. I think I heard her, or I read something she said. I think she's a writer, because she said one of the things she learned was, you don't wait for inspiration. You just sit down and write like a job.
Yeah.
I don't do that. I don't do that. I have hundreds of other things that I am doing, and I write when I have a story to tell.
Yeah. That's interesting, because even in journalism, we have this concept, like people think that being a journalist is either is this whole package, and it's not, because sometimes you're a writer, sometimes you can't write, but you know how to ferret out a story. So lots of people don't understand that there's this differentiation anyway. So even with writers, there are those that will just slog and write, and there are those that can tell stories. And I don't suppose you can put a value here or there. The job of a publisher is to put it, I suppose, together and
create a So actually, I'm more comfortable calling myself a publisher, because that's like a real job, and I get a salary for it.
Makes
so
sense.
Yeah, and I'm a storyteller. I kind of like that title.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ameena. This has been a very interesting, great chat to have with you.
Thank you so much, Roel. Thank you to FNF. Thank you to is it Female Forward?
Female Forward, yes. That's the
And may all the females go forward, especially in Sri Lanka. And good luck to you. I've always admired your work. So
thank you so much.
Do what you do best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Bye.